Welcome back. As we reported at the top of the hour, House Speaker John Boehner and Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell in the Wall Street Journal this morning saying that the new Congress will get to work on jobs and plan to focus on legislation encouraging employers to hire more of our country's veterans. Howard Schultz is chairman and CEO of Starbucks. He's on board with that initiative. He's gone so far as to employ former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates on his board of directors in an effort to create more opportunity for veterans. Howard joins me right now in a First on Fox interview. Good to see you, Howard. Thank you so much for joining us. Veterans have, this subject has been very important to you for years.
Yes.
You wrote a book on it with Rajiv, your co-writer here. For Love of Country is the name of the book. Why is this so important to you?
It's really important for a number of reasons, but we are in an unprecedented situation. 2.5 million extraordinary young men and women have served in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 10 to 15 years. But as an all-volunteer service, most of the country, about 90% of the people, really have no skin in the game. As a result of that, 1 million veterans are now entering civilian life. Their transition is very tough. For many of them, the war begins at home. The most important thing for a veteran right now is self-esteem and a job. We have to encourage every business and every business leader to recognize they have incredible skills, even though their skill-based may not be perfectly applicable to the job. Leadership, ethics, integrity, mission-driven, team-driven. These are great people, and this is what the country needs to do.
This is probably the most important characteristics for any job, the ones that you just mentioned: leadership, integrity, discipline.
Absolutely.
And this is what our veterans are so good at, more so than anybody else.
However, and if you look at the veteran population, unemployment among veterans is higher than the national average. This is something that must be done. Another thing I'm concerned about is if we go 6 months to a year as the war is winding down, veterans come home, I don't want the American people to lose sight of what has happened here. They're not coming home to a parade. They have to come home to a country that embraces them and celebrates them. That's why the book is so important. That's why our concert Tuesday on the outside on the National Mall, broadcast by HBO, is critical to celebrate, to honor, and pay respect to the people who have served this nation.
Tell us about that concert in terms of the impact that it will have Tuesday night.
Well, I think between HBO, Starbucks, and Chase, we're doing something that is going to be an epic event. I mean, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people outside on the mall in Washington, D.C. Bruce Springsteen, Eminem, Rihanna, Carrie Underwood. Wow. You can imagine. But the real story here is not about the entertainers. The real story here is recognizing what extraordinary contribution and sacrifice veterans and their families have done. And this is an opportunity to pay great respect and honor them.
That's what you've done throughout your entire career. And I love the fact that as a business person, you make sure to set that tone for your employees. And this is something that has been very important to you over the years.
Well, I think what we've learned at Starbucks over the last 40 years is that the balance between profitability and a social conscience is not always about the bottom line. We've had incredible success. We just had a record year, record revenue, record profit. And I think what is demonstrated, it's not always about the P&L. It's about the values, the guiding principles, and the culture of the company. And I think our customers recognize what Starbucks stands for. And what we're trying to do here is use the platform of Starbucks to raise the consciousness of the country and get veterans the respect they deserve.
Good for you. All right, the op-ed today in the Journal by Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, they say they want to, the Hire More Heroes Act is legislation encouraging employers to hire more of our country's veterans. What would you like to see on a policy level? I mean, you could use, your platform on a business level to, as much as you can, but what about on a policy level? What do you want to see out of Washington?
Well, I think the rhetoric out of Washington, put that aside for a moment. I don't think Washington can solve the problem for the issue of unemployment among veterans who are coming back from the war. This is a business issue. This is a private sector issue. What we need is for the entire business community to be galvanized around the fact that we have to hire veterans. And what we've learned at Starbucks, this is so important, there's a secondary benefit. Not only do they come into the company and make a significant contribution, but people who are working alongside them have such pride in the company. And as a result of that, the values and culture and the contribution of veterans goes up. What we want Washington to do is say all the right things, put a policy in place that helps veterans in transitional skills. But this is something that businesses and business leaders need to do.
All right, so you don't think Washington could really move the needle on this? This is about the private sector moving the needle.
I really think that's true.
Let me ask you about the midterms this week and sort of the news headlines of the week. You know, it feels like they're coming out, you know, they're going to get together, they're going to talk. Do you think anything can get done now that we have this divided government in the next 2 years?
Do you want me to be really honest?
Be really honest, Howard.
You know, I think if we look at the last 10 plus years, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, we have seen a very divisive government, dysfunctional, polarized. I would love to see a great deal more stability, putting people first, citizenship over partisanship. But I can't sit here and say I've got a lot of confidence about that.
Yeah, well, we've seen this. We've been down this road before. And I know as a business leader, you were very upset when, you know, we came to a full stop in terms of not being able to get anything done a couple of years ago.
Well, I think for us as Americans and as business leaders, let's stop complaining. Let's stop pointing fingers at Washington. And let's do what we can as business leaders and as private citizens to move the country forward. And this initiative with veterans is, I think, is an emblematic example of what we at Starbucks are trying to do.
You just talked about your record quarter, record revenue. How would you characterize things out there today in terms of the consumer, in terms of the broad economy?
I think if we look at last year versus this year, we're going into the holiday season with more optimism. I think it's going to be a decent season for retailers, and we've got good momentum in our business and feeling pretty good about the year.
You have to feel like the drop in oil prices is a real positive going into the holiday season for consumers.
No question.
More money in their pockets.
I think more discretionary opportunities to go to Starbucks.
Let me ask you about Apple Pay and about mobile payments. How important is it for Starbucks? I mean, you had a deal for a while with Square. Where does that stand?
Well, let's go back in time. First off, Starbucks right now is processing about 7 million mobile transactions a week in our stores. That is 90% of all mobile transactions at retail for the entire United States over the last 12 months. We are the undisputed leader. Apple Pay, eBay, and PayPal splitting off, these are all great companies that are trying to chase a massive opportunity in who is going to become the Visa of mobile payment. Starbucks is going to be in the middle of those conversations. We will launch a mobile order and pay in Oregon next month. We will roll that out nationally. We'll have a delivery service in many markets towards the second half of calendar 15. And all I can say is that we've integrated mobile payment into a loyalty program, very successful with the company, and we believe we can leverage that loyalty program and Starbucks payment processes both inside and outside of our stores eventually. However, we are in the nascent stage of this. It's so early on. There's going to be lots of winners, and we believe we're going to be at the center of that conversation.
So you do think this is where this is going? People want to pay on their mobile device?
I think at some point in the future, the majority of currency in America will be cashless.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think that's happening. There's no, I mean, every sign that you can see about what's happening is going to lead us that way.
And is that a global phenomenon, not just the U.S.?
Not only is it a global phenomenon,
it started,
but in Asia, they are so far ahead of us. So this is coming from that part of the world, and it's coming to the U.S. And smartphones and smartphone technology, trust in mobile payment, all that stuff is coming very fast to the United States.
And you don't think we have to worry in terms of security of our information, of our data when you're paying with your device?
Does anybody worry today about giving a credit card at a restaurant? And think about 20 years ago, that was a big deal. I think trust is going to be built and firewalls are going to be built, and we're going to be in a very good situation with regard to that.
You mentioned international. Let's talk about that for a second. I feel like 2 weeks ago we were worried about Europe. We were, all talking about the global growth slowdown all around the world, hitting U.S. earnings, and now here we are at record highs and the vibrancy once again talking about jobs all over. What are you seeing in Asia? What are you seeing in Europe?
Our business in Western Europe is very, very good as opposed to 2 years ago. We just had a record quarter in the UK as an example. Asia is a completely different story. The growth that we're seeing in China, the success we're seeing in China, our business in Japan. If you look at the global opportunities that consumer brands have in the world today, this is a much better environment than it was a year ago. The only issue I think that's out there, which is very significant, is the fragile issue around geopolitical issues and things that could create a significant downturn in consumer confidence. But in terms of where things stand today, I think the global economy and the opportunity for consumer companies is very, very good.
Let me wrap up where I started. What number or what sort of end result are you going to feel was successful, if in fact we see veterans and companies getting together and ensuring that we are employing our veterans? What kind of number? What's a success rate for you?
Well, there's 1 million plus veterans entering civilian life in the next 12 months or so.
Realistically?
I want to see the majority of those veterans have a great opportunity to get placed in a job in a company that will give them the self-esteem and the financial security for their company. And I want every business leader to recognize this is not charity, this is not pity, this is good business.
Howard, thanks for making the case. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Howard Schultz is co-author of For Love of Country, CEO of Starbucks. Let's get you caught up on